Something is brewing in Kenya, and it's not coming from the streets. It's coming from Washington. President William Ruto is in serious trouble, but this time, it's not with his citizens, not even with his political enemies. His real problem lies thousands of miles away, with his foreign masters, the United States. Just a few weeks ago, the chairman of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee did something unusual. He openly questioned President Ruto's loyalty to the United States, and by the end of his statement, he made it clear the U.S. is now considering whether it should rethink its entire relationship with Kenya. That's political code for one thing. The puppet is no longer useful. But how did things fall apart? How did a president once praised as a trusted partner become a target for suspicion? What exactly did Ruto do to anger his Western backers? That's what we're about to uncover in today's video. Just last year, President William Ruto was riding high. He was Washington's golden boy, America's trusted man in East Africa. Under President Joe Biden's administration, Ruto bent over backward to keep the U.S. happy, and in return, he got something no other African leader had. Kenya was named a major non-NATO ally. It was a rare badge of honor, a clear sign of trust, but if only he knew how fast things would change. A few weeks ago, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee held a crucial meeting. The agenda? The United States' future in East Africa and the Horn, a region they now describe as being at a turning point or a breaking point. And at the very center of that conversation, President Ruto. In a sharp, calculated opening, Senator James Risch, chair of the committee, didn't mince words. He called out Ruto directly. Just last month, he said, President Ruto declared that Kenya, a major non-NATO ally, and China are co-architects of a new world order. That's not just alignment with China, that's allegiance. Then came the warning. Relying on leaders who embrace Beijing so openly is an error. It's time to reassess our relationship with Kenya. The message was loud and clear. America felt betrayed. The message from Washington couldn't have been clearer. President Ruto must fall back in line or face the consequences. As far as the U.S. is concerned, being a non-NATO ally comes with conditions. And the most important one? Loyalty. Kenya, under that label, is expected to walk hand in hand with the United States and its allies. No detours, no experiments with China. But Ruto seems to have forgotten that. He forgot that being a sovereign nation means very little when your sovereignty ends where American interests begin. He forgot that in the eyes of Washington, Kenya can only make independent decisions, as long as those decisions don't challenge U.S. dominance. Ironically, it wasn't always this way. Back when Joe Biden was president, Ruto played the perfect role, pro-American, pro-West, and eager to please. During his 2022 campaign, he made headlines attacking China, promising to kick out Chinese workers, expose shady loan deals, and reduce Kenya's dependence on Beijing. But once he came into power, things got complicated. He began to change his tune. On the global stage, he presented himself as a bold, unapologetic African leader. At international summits, he called out the West, demanding respect for the continent. In one moment that grabbed global attention, Ruto even declared he would not attend any summit organized by a foreign power, unless that country treated Africa as an equal. It was a powerful message, but one that didn't sit well in Western capitals. At first, many believed President Ruto was a man of principle. In 2023, he refused to attend the Russia-Africa summit. And to the public, it seemed like he was staying true to his word, that he wouldn't attend any foreign summit unless it respected Africa. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening. By skipping the Russia summit, Ruto wasn't protesting foreign interference. He was sending a signal to Washington, a message that said, "I'm on your side." And it worked. He had already strengthened military ties with the U.S., and now, with this gesture, he was proving himself to be a dependable ally of the West. From that moment, America began to take him more seriously. Then came January 2024. The same Ruto who once swore he'd never attend a summit organized by a foreign power showed up at the Italy-Africa summit. And not just as a participant. He smiled, posed for pictures, and stood shoulder to shoulder with the African Union Chair, Azali Assoumani, and AU Commission Chief, Moussa Faki. He even waited in line, along with dozens of other African leaders, to greet Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The backlash was swift. Critics called him out for hypocrisy, accusing him of double standards. And in an effort to save face, Ruto released a statement trying to explain his presence. He said, "I have previously noted that an invitation extended by one country to all 54 African nations did not necessarily serve Africa's best interests. But this summit, this one felt different because of the pragmatic approach taken by Prime Minister Meloni." But his explanation didn't hold water. After all, there was no real difference between the Italy summit and the Russia summit. The only difference was who hosted it. And that's where things get even more interesting. President Ruto became the first African leader to publicly endorse Italy's new plan for Africa, unveiled during the Italy-Africa summit. To Ruto, this plan was proof that Europe was finally taking Africa seriously. He even expressed confidence that Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni would keep her promise to push for Africa's interests during her G7 presidency. With that endorsement, one thing became undeniable. Ruto was now fully aligned with the West. But then came the moment that sealed it all. At the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, President Joe Biden made a request. He needed help restoring order in Haiti, a nation that, many believe, has suffered deeply due to years of U.S. interference. And who stepped forward first? President William Ruto. He pledged to send 1,000 Kenyan troops to help the U.S. bring order to Haiti. Critics saw it for what it really was: Kenya helping the U.S. tighten its grip on a vulnerable black nation. But Ruto didn't stop there. In the same session, he declared full support for Ukraine in its war against Russia. That revelation alone explained why he had been so quick to distance himself from the Russia-Africa summit. Ruto wasn't neutral. He had chosen a side. From that point on, the Biden administration sang Ruto's praises. He was no longer just an ally. He was dependable. Even when his own people filled the streets of Nairobi to protest his government, even when those protests were met with brutal crackdowns that left hundreds dead, the West stayed silent. Because to them, Ruto was doing exactly what a puppet should do. This was U.S. double standards in plain sight. For decades, it's been said that America will gladly work with even the most oppressive regime, as long as that regime serves its interests. And Ruto? He was doing exactly that, playing his role, serving Washington's agenda. Back in Kenya, people filled the streets in protest. In Haiti, outrage erupted at the thought of foreign boots on their soil, again. But Ruto didn't flinch. Despite the backlash, he stood firm on his decision to send Kenyan police to Haiti on behalf of the United States. In fact, Ruto flew to Washington for a 3-day meeting with President Biden. And when it was over, the two leaders stood side by side before the world. Ruto didn't just defend his actions, he doubled down. He told the crowd that Kenya's decision was voluntary, that his country had a long history of peacekeeping missions around the world, 47 of them in fact. And now, Haiti was just another name on that list. Committing Kenya to Haiti, he said, is not so much about what happened in the past. Then came the line that made headlines. We don't find that the U.S. is committing Kenya to Haiti. I am the president of Kenya, and I have decided. It is up to the people of Kenya to commit their troops through their own established legal structures. It sounded noble, but to many, it rang hollow. Because behind the grand speeches and polished smiles, the question still lingered. Who was really making the decisions? Just days after his high-profile meeting with President Biden, Ruto received what many saw as the crowning moment of his presidency. As a loyal puppet of the West, the United States officially designated Kenya a major non-NATO ally. For Washington, this wasn't just a title, it was a strategic move. It solidified Kenya's role as a trusted proxy in US-led military operations across Africa. With this new status, Kenya became more than just a partner. It became a platform, a launchpad for American military power. 2 permanent US Africa command bases were announced, one in Mombasa, the other in Manda Bay. For Ruto, it must have felt like a diplomatic victory, a sign that his allegiance was paying off. But what he failed to see was that nothing in geopolitics is permanent, because the winds in Washington were already shifting. When Donald Trump returned to power, he brought a different agenda, one that didn't care much for Africa or for past alliances. Trump's America wasn't about building partnerships. It was about pulling back, slashing aid, and rewriting deals on his own terms. And Kenya? It was caught in the crossfire. One of Trump's first moves was slashing USAID funding. The result? Over 30,000 jobs lost in Kenya. Critical health programs, like HIV treatment for 1.4 million people, now hang by a thread. Current reports suggest medical supplies may only last another 3 to 6 months. Even trade was no longer guaranteed. Ruto had placed his hopes on the renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, a deal that gives Kenya duty-free access to U.S. markets. But with Trump back, the future of AGOA is uncertain. No agreement has been reached, and experts doubt it ever will be. If the deal collapses, Kenya's $500 million textile industry could fall with it. Tens of thousands of jobs in manufacturing, cotton farming, logistics, gone. And once again, Kenya will pay the price for choosing to serve someone else's interests. Ironically, even the Haiti mission, the one Ruto undertook to prove his loyalty to Washington, is now falling apart. The U.S., once so eager for Kenya's support, is quietly stepping back. Funding has slowed, supplies are running low, and the salaries of the Kenyan officers deployed to Haiti? Hanging in the balance. This is the harsh reality of Ruto's gamble. He played Washington's game, and now he's holding the bag. And as always, it's the people, ordinary Kenyans, who will suffer the consequences of a decision they never made. Realizing just how fragile the U.S. alliance had become, Ruto did something no one saw coming. He turned to China. Yes, China. The same country he fiercely criticized during his presidential campaign. The same China he once accused of debt traps and economic exploitation. But now, things had changed. And China was willing to listen. Unlike the West, China didn't care about lectures or control. It only cared about mutual benefit. So Ruto flew to Beijing on a state visit, triggering alarm bells in Washington. And from that visit came big deals, $950 million worth of them. Agreements were signed across manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, and infrastructure. The biggest highlight? Reviving Kenya's stalled standard gauge railway project, extending it to the Ugandan border. A plan frozen since 2019 due to lack of funds. Also included was the expansion of the Nairobi-Nakuru highway through a public-private partnership. To the US, it was a slap in the face. To Ruto, it was a desperate reset. According to official reports, Ruto's visit to China wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Kenya and China signed 20 new cooperation agreements, covering everything from science and water management to e-commerce, transport, and vocational training. Among the biggest deals, a $150 million construction agreement with China Wuyi, another $400 million in agricultural investments led by China's Zonkin Group in Kenya's Baringo County, and a $230 million tourism development partnership with the Hunan Conference Exhibition Group. This wasn't just business, it was a bold signal. China was doubling down on Kenya, and Ruto? He was embracing it with open arms. At a joint press briefing, Ruto stood proudly beside his Chinese hosts and praised the progress made through Chinese-funded infrastructure. "We have achieved many things together," he said. He celebrated Kenya's membership in the Belt and Road Initiative, calling it a game-changer for regional growth and a blueprint for connectivity across East Africa. But Ruto wasn't done. In a keynote speech at Peking University, standing before China's brightest minds, he issued a challenge to the world. He called for a new global order, one that is fair, inclusive, and sustainable. The current system, he said, is broken, dysfunctional, and no longer fit for purpose. It was the clearest sign yet. Ruto was pivoting, and the West was watching. But Ruto didn't stop at trade deals. He made a declaration, one that shook Washington. Standing in Beijing, he boldly stated that Kenya and China were not just trade partners. They were co-architects of a new global order, one that is fair, inclusive, and sustainable. He went on to frame Kenya as a bridge between rival worlds. This visit, The first African state visit to China this year mirrors my 2024 visit to the United States, the first African visit there in 15 years. Perhaps symbolically, Kenya can serve as a bridge between East and West, North and South, in an era of deepening geopolitical tensions. But if Ruto thought his words would be welcomed by both sides, he miscalculated. In Washington, that speech lit a fire under the Senate. You see, the United States is deeply invested in preserving the current global order, an order it built, controls, and benefits from. The idea of a new world order threatens that dominance. And when a close ally like Kenya starts echoing the language of China and Russia, alarms go off in Capitol Hill. Because for the US, China and Russia are not just competitors, they are adversaries. They're leading the charge to dismantle American global hegemony, one relationship at a time. And no ally of the US, especially not a non-NATO ally like Kenya, is expected to even flirt with that idea. President Ruto had crossed a line, and now Washington was preparing its response. Now, Ruto finds himself at a crossroads. It's simple. Either he distances himself from China, or he risks losing America's partnership. And while the US hasn't officially issued an ultimatum, the message couldn't be clearer. But there was more. When US Senator James Risch blasted Ruto for aligning with China, he didn't stop at foreign policy. He took aim at Ruto's government itself. Rising abductions and torture in East Africa signal more than abuse, he said. They expose state decay and impunity. It was a not-so-subtle jab at Kenya's human rights record under Ruto's watch. Last year, during the wave of anti-IMF austerity protests, Kenyan security forces cracked down with brutal force. At least 63 people were killed, dozens more were abducted, and to this day, 29 remain unaccounted for. But here's where the hypocrisy hits hardest. Where was that outrage last year? Washington didn't just ignore the violence, they helped manage it. As protests erupted and threatened US interests in the region, the American government stood firmly behind Ruto. They offered advice, strategy, and full political backing as the army rolled into the streets of Nairobi. Yes, you heard that right. The US, the same nation now criticizing Ruto's record, applauded his decision to use force. Even more shocking, it was just last year that the Biden administration welcomed Ruto with full honors. This, despite his widely known role in the 2007 to 2008 post-election ethnic violence, a period that saw over 1,200 people killed and 500,000 displaced. The truth? America never had a problem with Ruto's past, as long as he served their present. Because as we've said before, and as history continues to prove, the US doesn't care about democracy or human rights. It only cares about interests. Now, with the mask finally off, it seems Ruto is beginning to understand the bitter truth, what it really means to be a puppet. In a last-ditch attempt to smooth things over, Kenya's Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, rushed to reassure Washington. What President Ruto was talking about is collective ownership, he said. America is a big power, and so is China. The two nations are important to us, and we will continue to work together. He insisted, this is not a shift in Kenya's policy to the detriment of anybody. We are not here to play one country against another. But the message from the US is already loud and clear. Obey or face the consequences. Now the world is watching. What will Ruto do? Will he bow, once again, to American pressure? Or will he take a bold step and choose what's best for his people? Because the real issue here is bigger than Kenya. It's about a continent long trapped in the shadow of Western dominance. For too long, African leaders have been made to believe that the only path to success is to serve Western interests. But history tells a different story, a story of pain, poverty, and promises that were never kept. That's why things are changing. From Burkina Faso to Mali, from Niger to Guinea, the military leaders of the Sahel are breaking the mold. They are forging new paths, turning toward non-Western partners like China and Russia. It's not the easy road, but maybe it's the right one. Because Africa's future must be chosen by Africans, not dictated from Washington. The lessons of history are clear. Africa may have won its flags and anthems in the 20th century, but not its full freedom. The anti-colonial struggles gave us formal independence, but not liberation from the grip of global capitalism. For decades, African elites have served as middlemen, trading the soul of the continent for foreign praise and private gain. Today, as the old world order begins to crack, a new generation must rise, not just to resist, but to finish what was started. This time, the struggle must go deeper. It must tear out the root of the problem, capitalism itself. Real freedom for Africa means controlling its land, its labor, its future. And that can only be achieved through international socialism, an alliance of working people across Africa, the US, China, Europe, and beyond. Because until the chains are broken everywhere, they remain a threat everywhere. The dream of peace, equality, prosperity, and democracy will never be handed down by the powerful. It must be built by the people, together. So, what do you think? Is Africa ready to reclaim its future? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, drop your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. This is not the end, it's just the beginning.